All right, everybody, we're live now. This is exciting. I hope you're all ready for this great discussion we're going to have. Hi, I'm Jessie Bussard, Executive Director of the Craft Maltsters Guild, and we're here today to talk about how craft malt is changing the game. I want to let our speakers each give a quick introduction of themselves and let us tell us about your malt house, types of malt you produce, maybe a little bit about types of brewers you work with. Jen, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Jen Zimmerman. I'm with Maltwerks. We're a malt house located in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. We are in our third year of production, and I've been with the company about 2.5 years. We are currently doing 5 different base malts made from, we're sourcing from 6 different barley providers. We use Synergy because it works very well with our system. We also do 3 different kinds of wheat: torrefied, hard red spring, and soft white. We do oats, rye, and a distiller's malt has been our newest addition, and we also do an undermodified chip malt.
Cool. And just for anybody that doesn't know what Synergy is, that's a barley variety.
It is, sorry.
No worries.
And we work with brewers in Minnesota, where we're located, as well as the Dakotas and Wisconsin. And we work with a company down in Iowa that distributes our malt in that area. And we're predominantly with the breweries kind of in that 3-barrel to 20-barrel world, though we do work with some larger companies on some different projects.
Very cool. Arne, take us to Nevada.
Okay, so we are 40 Mile Malt in Fallon, Nevada, and we are the only producing maltster in the state, which is, we're kind of proud of that.
It's cool.
We currently make malt from corn, rye, and wheat, and of course barley is our biggest, and we produce a pale, a Vienna, a Munich, and a Pilsner, and we're also do quite a bit of distiller's malt. That's actually our biggest product right now. So.
Very cool. Jeff?
I am Jeff Bloem. I'm the founder and head maltster at Murphy and Rood Malting Company. We're located in Central Virginia in Charlottesville. We just celebrated our 4th birthday in February. We actually came to market as a specialty malt house. So we built our production facility to actually cater to some of the smaller volume, more impactful specialty malts. We also produce quite a high volume of base malts, but we spent some extra time designing our kiln capabilities and our drum roaster. So we're working with a fairly wide variety. We can boast having the smallest brewery in Virginia, as well as working with some of the biggest ones. So we are a good way to weave in craft malt into kind of existing production operations and schedules and volumes. And so it gives us the added flexibility and diversity that oftentimes brewers are looking for, as opposed to a wholesale change in malt. So we enjoy a fairly wide variety of malt types. We of course malt barley, wheat, rye, oats. We carry about 25 different products, ranging from obviously base malts to higher kiln like Viennas and Munichs, to crystals and to dry roasts. So we certainly have our hands full, and there's no lacking of experimentation and creativity going on in our malt house at any given time.
That's awesome. I just wanted to give a quick summary too of the Craft Maltsters Guild. For anyone that may not be familiar with us, we're a nonprofit trade association that represents craft maltsters like the people you're hearing from today. All right, let's get into some discussion. Let's start with just big picture. How is craft malt different? What makes craft malt stand out from malt from large-scale maltsters? And anybody can jump in here and say something if they would like.
I can dive into that if you want.
Excuse me?
I can dive into that.
Sure, go for it, Arne.
Okay. So for me, the easiest way to compare your small craft maltster versus the industrial scale for the brewers is to look in the mirror, look at your brewing operation. So what's your customer base? Do you want to drink beer that's made from a mom and pop operation, say a 7-barrel brewer? They're fairly common, and that's my market. Or do you want to go down and buy industrial produced average beer that's on sale at Walmart? It's a pretty broad comparison there, but it's something to think about. The malt quality and production scale is very similar. Something you can, as a brewer, you can look at yourself. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we as a company are sourcing from people that we know, people that we trust, farms that we've been on. People that we work with are small business owners like we are and like you are as brewers. So we're consistently trying to complete that circle of, farm to glass. And we're trying to do that in the most positive way we can, taking into consideration, land preservation and really focusing on the importance of the small farmer to the small maltster to the small brewer to your local drinker.
Yeah, sounds like what I'm hearing here is a lot about the positive local impact, the relationships, the close relationships you build, and the traceability of the product.
Sure.
Yeah, I would add, I think a primary difference is, for likely all of the craft maltsters in the guild and nationwide, is our fields are nearby. If we're not farming our own land, we're farming our neighbor's land, or they're farming it for us, or we're within, at least, if not state boundaries, within regional boundaries, which then leads us to the traceability comment around single origin. We're typically, a single batch of craft malt is typically derived from a single lot of grain of a single variety that came from a single place. And so there's that ability to really trace your craft malt product back to where it came from.
Cool. Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the production systems that y'all use to produce the malt. We all know that large scale malting typically uses a mechanized type system. It's very huge batches. But with craft malt, there's a lot more diversity in the type of production methods used in the equipment and the process. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the type of malting system that you work with, and maybe why you specifically chose that or to go that route. And I know, Arne, you have a really cool story here about how you actually built your own malting equipment, which is fascinating to me.
Yes,
so,
I did. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool. So somebody feel free to jump in. Would love to hear more about that.
Well, if you put me on the spot, I guess I'm first.
Okay.
So there's a lot of press given to the malting process, floor malting versus drum malting or table malting or whatever, and it's kind of a misconception. The basic differences you have are pneumatic malting or like a floor malt. So pneumatic malting, what you do is you push modified air through the grain as you're malting, whether that's in a drum or a table or a huge factory tower malting system. Those are the two basic differences. And so in my system, when I got involved in this, I had to do a lot of research, and there's a lot of considerations there. For us, actual your climate, where do you live? So floor malting, I look into that, and we're in Nevada, which is the driest state in the country. We're high altitude.
Yeah.
2 weeks a year, it's 110 degrees sometimes. In a floor malting system, you can't control the germination. It's going to dry out. It's just, anyway, that was a big consideration with me. An enclosed system gives you a lot better control over the germination process. I looked at the other processes. For me, the drum made the most sense. One, I've got the background to build it myself. fabricator for 35 years, and we went a different direction with this. But with it, this is kind of off the table. But one consideration with the floor malting operation, it's labor intensive, and I don't think you get the consistency. Whereas a drum, you can control the whole product through the whole process. And I think the biggest advantage I have with the drum system, instead of being labor intensive with wooden rakes and all the traditional really neat stuff, I can go push a button on my drum and sit back and have a beer while it turns itself, which is a pretty nice option. And that's a basic description of what we do and why. But it's not the only system out there, and it's certainly not the best, cheapest. But I think for small scale, to give you the best product, it works the best for us.
Cool.
Yeah, I would have to say there are of the million different ways you can malt. It's a vitally important decision to make, and often it doesn't necessarily follow your desires. It may fall into what kind of utilities you have available. Are you zoned? How are you in a building? What size is your building? Whether you want to be located near farm or grain sources, or within a finished product distribution location. And so there's lots of things that go into it. For us, we did the typical make one plan and then pivot about 2 months before we were supposed to open, which then extended our build out time about 4 months. So what we did end up going with is a Saladin germination design. But we did, in this world of malting, you can do it in any combination, steeping and germination in the same vessel, kiln separately, steep separately, germinate and kiln in the same vessel, do it all separately. And it all comes into, to Arne's point about fabrication, the ability to monitor process and probes and equipment associated with that. And so what we had just finally decided to do was build all separate systems. We have a separate steep tank, separate Saladin germination room, and then a separate kiln. We also, of course, have our drum roaster. But we were able to essentially tailor each piece of equipment to exactly what it's supposed to do, as opposed to trying to build a system that gets, it's in a very cool, high moisture environment during germination, and then all of a sudden you flip a switch and it's hot and dry, and equipment reacts differently to that. What materials you're using. So, and we also felt like it was an approachable starting point for us. I mean, we didn't have to necessarily give up the farm, no pun intended, to essentially fund the malt house. And so they're resource intensive, they're capital intensive as it is. And so if you can build you can find a starting point that is approachable for you and your situation, but then also provides you options to scale and scale in the way you want, or perhaps add to that. That's the best place to start. And I think we all have different combos and love our way of doing it separately. And I think that's what makes essentially a malt house, a malt house flavor profile. It's kind of like the terroir of production, if you will.
Sounds a lot like opening a brewery and how craft brewers talk about their breweries.
Absolutely, yes. Right?
To grant or not to grant.
At Maltwerks, we use an intelligent malt system, which comes from Fargo, North Dakota. So we chose it one because it was a local company close to where our malt house is. So that was helpful because we were able to kind of use them as a resource as we built out. We're a father, son, and business partner-owned company, so they all live in the area, and it was great because they were able to form this relationship and put together the system and build it the way to kind of their specifications. It's a 2-vessel system on top, and then everything else happens in the bottom. So everything is steeped and kilned at the bottom, and then finished product is moved out. So we have 6 vessels. They're 5-ton vessels, but we found that the sweet spot for each of ours is about 3 to 3.5 tons. It tends to be where they like to run. And it seems to be about the batch size of the farmers that we're working with that seems to suit kind of the relationship between us and them as far as everything. So yeah, we've worked really hard to kind of create the system that we thought would work best for us. And we have a similar situation to you, Arne, in that we are in two very different climate zones. It's really dry in the winter and it's really moist in the summer. So we tend to do a lot of our malting kind of in that spring, fall, and we build up inventory a little higher in those times because it's harder to keep the moisture going. The guys are a little bit, they've become weather professionals as well. Our plant team, we have so many different areas in the plant where we've got moisture probes and temperature gauges, and we do all of our testing in different parts of the plant so that we can determine how well something is going to germ in different locations, because we don't know exactly what the world is going to feel like that day. And Minnesota's weather changes on a dime, so we have to be, really agile in working with our machines. So.
And one thing I would like to add that gives some appreciation to the way Jen and Arne do it is that another component of how to design your malt house is how much you need to move it from one place to another. So grain handling is a thing, and in Arne's case, drum malting is, it does a lot of the work for you, but you're also not risking damaging the grain, moving it from one place to another. And in Jen's case, gravity is a beautiful thing. You can steep and germ and then open a valve and it drops down and it's where it needs to be. And so that was most certainly a trade-off for us. And we are lucky in that we actually do try to weave in gravity where we can. We are a gravity-fed slurry steep out. So we steep out in a water grain mixture that is all essentially fire hosed into our germination box, all gravity driven. So there's, we reduce pumps, we do have to use a belt conveyor to move to kiln, but you can reduce equipment load with gravity and obviously going to single drum or single vessel units.
It's just really cool how everybody's system is so different, but yet, the concepts of malting, the processes themselves are the same. But you can do it so many ways. It's interesting.
Yeah. So Jeff made an interesting point about scale, and that's a huge part of the conversation is what is the scale of your ag community, the scale of your brewing community, your malting community. It's an important topic to cover. And then just a side note, you reminded me. So Jeff and I do the same thing. We gravity steep out with a slurry. Steeping is a underrated part of the process. Is probably one of the most important. And then kilning also. We actually do the kilning inside the drum too. With the process, we can bring it up to temperature. And like Jeff said, reducing material handling, get rid of moving parts is a really big deal. So
yeah, I bet.
What we're trying to do, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned about your community. That's the next thing I wanted to talk about is local impact. I wanted to just ask each of you, where do you source your grains that you use for malting? Are you working directly with any farmers in your area? And do you have any guidelines or kind of just expectations of those farmers who are growing the malt, the barley or other grains that you're buying from them?
I mean, for us, it was definitely a learning curve. So we started utilizing a certain number of farmers that we already had connections with. Randy's a farmer himself. So he's like, oh, I have some friends that, grow food grade barley. Let's see if we can malt that. Well, we started with a pinnacle variety of barley. Doesn't work well. The proteins are too high. It just wasn't a great fit for us. So we switched to Genesis and we're like, okay, well, we'll give this barley variety a go. Still not exactly what we were going for. So now we've moved into the synergy. So it started kind of with that, like, who do we know? What farmers do we already have connections with? What kind of barley are they growing? What suits us? What suits malting in general? because not every barley variety wants to be malted.
It's true.
Doesn't work that way. And so that was kind of the first learning curve. And then once we were like, oh, okay, so we're going to stick with Synergy, that seems to be suiting our level. Where can we find, the farmers that we want to connect with that are and expand our reach? So I think our farthest farm is 353 miles in North Dakota from our malt house. So that's as far as we go. And then everything else is into the Dakotas and then into Minnesota. And the closest farm we work with is A-Frame Farms. They're an organic farm in western Minnesota. So
Cool.
So we definitely have a variety of, places that we source. We work with a seed company as well that helps us to source, kind of vet out some of the best we can find.
You want to jump in there, Jeff?
Sure. So we most certainly contract our grain with a multitude of farmers throughout the state. They're not necessarily the same farmers every year. We have kind of a network. It was actually one of the first things that I took on when I was building the malt house, is essentially building your farmer network. I mean, you really don't have a malt house if you don't have grain. And so, the grower aspect, and then also that first year of contracting grain is essentially our jumping off point in, particularly, so in Virginia, we malt winter varieties. And so in October, you have to get seed in the ground. And by June, you better have a place to put it. And so that was my big moment. And we work with farmers across the state, mostly for Mother Nature reasons. We don't try to put all of our eggs in one basket. We are, in a Piedmont region here where we have weather can change drastically if it's coming over a mountain. And so, Augusta County, for instance, on the other side of the mountain from our malt house is much, much wetter than we are in Charlottesville. And so it also comes into crop rotation, depending on, how many fields a particular farmer is working and what his crop diversity is, and crop rotation being so important, for soil health and for disease resistance, that it really becomes kind of a dance. Coming up this time of year, in about a month, we're going to be harvesting grain, but then also about 10 days later, securing contracts for the next growing year. And so, in many times we are waiting for grain quality analysis to come back in while we're also making our decisions for who's going to grow what and when and how much. And so it is much like we are a relationship-driven industry from the sales side with our customers. We are also, I would venture to say, almost more relationship-driven with our growers, and being able to understand the operation they have and their needs to, avoid risk or take a bet one year. It's a delicate balance. I mean, I thought I lost forever one of my favorite barley growers in Southern Virginia, Southwest Virginia, and he came back this year, and it was like the greatest phone call I've ever had. And so he couldn't stay away. I mean, what can I say? But it's those are very important moments for business, and so it's definitely trying to build your network and keep it strong and make sure you're taking care of the people who are taking care of you, for sure.
Yeah, and there's just so much going on in those relationships with farmers. I mean, you have to understand the environment and the crop rotation they're working with, and just you learn a lot, I'm sure.
It's a process. So let me throw my 2 cents in there. We are a small farmer, family owned. We grow all our own barley, which we're very small scale. It's fascinating to get your input from these guys in different parts of the country and the trials and tribulations that we all go through. So what Jen mentioned in the high proteins, it's a big deal. There's that part of it, and it's not just variety; it's soil science and crop conditions and rotation and nitrogen in the soil. And it's a fascinating science, but it's a tough learning curve. So I'll give you an example of something that we've went through recently or constantly growing through. We've tried different varieties, and there's it takes a year to figure out a variety. There are several universities who are well funded and backed to produce different varieties of barley, which is great. The problem with that is they're funded by the large brewing companies. So being out in Nevada, which is kind of like a third world country, we have to make it up as we go along. Right now, there's exactly 3 malt barley growers in the state of Nevada, the nation's 7th largest state. Wow. And our total production wouldn't fill a train car. And it's fun to be part of. We love a challenge. We're making it work. But the challenges that everybody faces, and from a farmer's standpoint, it's an economic decisions. So like Jen and Jeff talking about contracting with their farmers, barley is not a high value crop. There's less and less of it planted every year. There's like 20% of the barley production right now that there was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
We have to keep the farmers in the loop in this conversation. It's critical, or there won't be a craft malting industry. Luckily, people drink beer and like to have a good time. And most farmers don't want to develop their land; they want to farm it. And
yeah,
that's where we're at. And from my personal perspective, so primarily our area grows alfalfa, and we feed cows, and that's what it is. But barley is a fantastic rotation crop. It's good for the soil. It's good for the crops that follow it. Blah blah blah. Getting the proteins down for the brewing standards is a huge challenge, and we're figuring it out and making good malt. But it's just stuff that the brewers maybe not aware of, and something that I think is important as they follow the chain down to the ground to the glass thing that we're trying to promote.
Certainly
is keep the farmers in the conversation, because it's very important. It really is.
Definitely, and I think with climate change and the need to be more sustainable and things like that, it's more important than ever to be understanding our own impact on the environment and ways we can improve that. So, and that ties back to working with the people that are directly on the land.
Well, and I think with COVID happening, it really shone a light upon those people in your community that are, what are we doing locally to sustain ourselves? We really had to look inward rather than outward, right, to take care of ourselves and our communities.
Oh,
yeah. And this has been a real aha moment, I think, for a lot of people.
That's good. Let's talk quick about quality and freshness. I wanted to just kind of talk about what are some of the protocols that craft maltsters in general have in place to make sure that the malt they're producing is meeting quality standards for brewers.
I can start there. We as a malt house invest quite a sizable load of resources to our quality, and it's not really just finished malt. It really begins with raw grain, and that's getting full analysis. I think I mentioned that before when we were talking about securing contracts and so on and so forth. I mean, you're waiting for lab results to come back in order to accept or reject certain grain. I mean, unfortunately for ag, our standards are relatively high in what we're trying to what we need to bring into the malt house to make the best finished product. And so, and it can oftentimes, fly in the face of what, particularly like in an animal feed market, you would be looking for. I mean, animal feed's looking for high protein, malt is looking for lower protein. But there are other things, in the milling world, while pre-sprout damage, which, affects enzyme, the enzyme package within a given grain, germination is not necessarily the biggest deal. We need high germination. We need moderate protein. We need low Don scores, which is a Fusarium head blight mycotoxin that can result in either illness at very, very high loads, which our threshold is very tight, or it results in gushing in beer. And so, and we also need to preserve enzymatic packages. So we need to not have sprout damaged grain, which becomes a spring rain problem, particularly here in Virginia. I mean, our frost deadline is my gosh, I think it was yesterday. So I think we've cleared the frost deadline. This is a big day, folks. But we also had a frost on Mother's Day last year, but then it always seems to want to pour rain here in June when we are right about to harvest fully mature, dried down grain, which, that can wipe out an entire harvest overnight. And so we're looking at that grain analysis, and then we bring it into the malt house. We track germination over periods of time. We track how that changes over time with a given sample. But then we're also tracking our returned COAs from our finished product for consistency reasons. So I can, certificates of analysis are very useful to a brewer, but most of the information in a malt COA is really informing the maltster and how we can tweak our processes or improve certain ways we're doing things. And we want to see consistent results. I mean, this is part of being single origin. Many of us, there are a few that do, that don't blend. And it's not that I'm against blending. I think it's a beautiful thing, but I frankly don't do it, and I don't know how to do it. And so I've learned to work without it. And so we're relying, this grain has a personality, and you need to Arne's point about, learning varieties. I mean, you have to learn single lots within a given year of a single variety just to learn how it's going to behave in the malt house. And so learning that and getting kind of in step with your grain is a very, very important indicator of your quality on the back end. And so it also, we can pull levers in the malt house to bring things up or down given what those COAs are. But then we also have in-house analysis stuff around moisture. We can measure color, we can measure fine grain extract, but then we also send it to third-party labs. And so there's in-house controls that we can do, kind of like hold and test stuff, make sure everything is sound before it goes out in a bag. But then we can also then release that and then be able to have even more data coming in that feeds our process.
That's a great explanation of quality analysis.
Excellent work.
Very, very in-depth and just hit it right on the head.
Yeah, we kind of go through something similar. We start with North Dakota grain inspection. So every load that comes in, we pull from different parts of the load, so that we're getting not just one section of the field, right? We're getting kind of a full idea. We send it out. We look for aflatoxins and ergot and all those things that could affect your barley right from the get. So when we get that testing back, then we do, some 4 and 8 moisture tests, like I mentioned, all over our plant to see how it's going to react well in our environment before we even begin the process. And so all of that takes weeks. We buy this beautiful barley, and then for weeks we are doing testing and making certain that we're actually have a great product before we ever even start the process, and I think that's kind of gets missed in the world, all the planning and all of the testing and all of the care that goes into it, even before the process begins.
A lot of TLC.
A whole lot of it. And then, right, as Jeff mentioned, you actually start the process. We work with Montana State University. They do all of our malt analysis for us, and we don't release any malted item out into the world without it being tested and without having a certificate, so that we can say these are the numbers. And if we don't like the numbers, sometimes that sucks, and we have to let something go. And we've done it before. We've fed some pigs, and we'll do it again if that's what happens. But we don't let anything out that we don't believe in.
Yeah, and it's no different than a brewer having a bad batch of beer, because
100%.
Maybe your glycol chiller goes out, and then you don't have temperature control on your fermenters, and like the yeast goes crazy, and it makes your beer bad. So,
it's an organism. It's a living thing at all times, and there's reverence to be said for living things, right? They have a mind of their own. For
sure, and a brewer should know that as well. I mean, fermentation, it's yeast doing all the work.
Exactly.
But the Arne, what do you do as far as on the farm there to kind of test your quality and whatnot?
Let me give you an example of what I did this morning.
Okay.
So we live in the desert where it doesn't rain.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have an irrigation project that's successful, has been for 100 years. We flood irrigate. So in order to control quality, I went out in the field with a shovel, and you dig down and you grab some dirt, and you put it in your hand and you squeeze it. Will it hold moisture? Is it ready to irrigate again? The first step. Incidentally, that ground will be irrigated tomorrow. It's ready to blah, blah, blah. But we can't rely on the rain. We can't cuss the rain. It's not an option for us. So that's the first step. If we hit that wrong, and this is from experience, drought stress produces higher protein in grain. This year is not necessarily unique, but challenging. Yeah. If you've been watching the weather, Nevada's in an extreme drought situation right now.
Yeah.
We're going to have to farm with probably 60% of the water that we usually get. Next year could be 10%, could be 120%. We don't know what's going to happen. So anyway, back to the quality of that. From that point, back to the farmers being important in this. And like, it's interesting for Jen and Jeff to mention declining a load of grain. Man, that's huge to the farmer. Why would he want to grow barley again? And what do you guys do as maltsters? Feed it to the pigs, which is a nonprofit, hard way to be in business. Just points that everybody's going through. And as far as quality, we do malt analysis on all our grains and our finished products, and the COAs and the numbers are a common point that a brewer and a maltster can look at the same time and kind of speak the same language. Yeah. But personally, I don't think they're the do-all, end-all answer to quality malt. There's something to be said, having a personal relationship with a brewer that you can stand and chew the malt and discuss. And this is conversations I have with the small brewers that I deal with. They're great people. Get that look in their eyes like, what can I do with that malt? And that's what makes it worth it. They experiment it. They put their profit margin on the line. They experiment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's having those conversations to assure the quality to the end consumer. Hard conversation to have, but fun.
It's my favorite part of my job, I think. Just the spark, that moment where you get a brewer excited and you're excited and everybody is having that moment.
Right.
And oh my gosh, I want to use this and this tastes better than this. When you have those moments, you're like, oh, I'm doing the right thing.
Right. And there are brewers who appreciate it, I think, more and more. So most of my brewing customers have been to the farm, they've been to the malt house, and we have the discussion, and we look at how things go and the reality of the situation. But tying that into craft malt, craft brewing is pretty critical. The numbers, the pencil brewing as it's called. Yes, I understand the science and the reasons for doing that, and it's no different than us fertilizing or whatever we do on the farm. But the end all do all is everybody, one, making the business work, two, having a good time, and three, producing a enjoyable product for the consumer. So.
And to bring an earlier point, kind of full circle here. I mean, one of that favorite farmer of mine who's back in the game. So, and I'm so happy about it. I mean, the reason he got out of the game is because he had 2 very bad years of either disease or bad luck. I mean, it's either rain or, the hose breaks on your sprayer when you're laying down nitrogen and completely destroys the field. I mean, things like that happen. And these decisions are not, I mean, they're very, very big deals. I mean, particularly me in the mid-Atlantic. I mean, I need to preserve my farmers. It's not like they're not a dime a dozen and that anyone will just grow this stuff. And even if they will, they may not necessarily be, it may not be their strong suit. I mean, they may not have any experience moving from other either soybeans or corn, or may not have necessarily small grain growing experience. And then it gets into variety stuff. But to bring it full circle, those decisions are brutal. When we do have to reject them, I will stop at nothing to find a home for this stuff, and likely stuff that could potentially pull a slightly higher premium than just sending it to the feed elevator. But at the same time, if I do take that grain in and malt it, and then it suffers on the malt COA, my brewers are mad at me, then I'm out of business, and then my farmer's out of business. So it's one of these full circle things that everybody is part of the ecosystem. And so if one piece breaks down, we're kind of putting everything, or we make bad decisions in order to preserve something on one side. We're putting kind of the whole kit and caboodle at risk. And so that's where oftentimes these decisions come down to, phone calls that are saying, I have to do this, it kills me. I'm going to do all I can do to find an outlet for this. And then if we have a successful year, trying to, grace them with potentially a higher bushel price or something like that. But it's a full circle thing. And so they don't want you to necessarily take poor performing grain for the sake of taking it for the sale and then put out inferior malts and then have brewers say, man, farmers in Virginia just can't grow good grain, and we can't produce good malt. I mean, that's just not the ethos that we all want to live in. And so it's all linked, and those decisions are very difficult, but at the same time, you're also have people looking back at you that this is not the first time that things have gone wrong in a farmer's field. And so there's a typical understanding. If anybody understands that kind of linked ecosystem, it's a farm.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you're saying here is the local economic impact, but also just the local agricultural impact from craft malt is huge and is helping to revitalize local agricultural economies. So, I mean, we're part of that process. It's great. Does anybody want to maybe comment just briefly on how sourcing local may have a positive effect on freshness and how that could fit into this whole conversation as well? Because we know that, quality is across the board, large scale, small scale. We're all doing a lot of the similar things to measure quality and track it and make sure we're doing a good job producing a safe product for brewers. But what about freshness, Jeff?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a vitally important thing. I mean, not only is craft malt diversifying the supply chain, so when other distribution chains break down, it is all of the eggs are not in a single basket. I mean, I think we saw this a lot with the capacity issues and freight this year. I mean, the Suez Canal was a major problem, and so I mean, these things affect, it rolls downhill. And so diversifying your supply chain is not only just a more risk averse way of doing business, but it's also from the standpoint of the stuff just doesn't have to come from so far away. I mean, one of the things that shocked me opening the malt house was that all of these breweries were opening up, but they were all using the same stuff. And it was coming from at the very, very closest point, maybe 600 miles away. And so, there's a lot of movement in that. And so we have taken, a long, hard look at the value of the short term of a localized supply chain. And so we started a campaign last year. It's called Mill Fresh, and it's really our campaign to kind of bring attention to conscious sourcing. And when I say conscious sourcing, I mean giving some thought as to what you are about to buy before you buy it. But then also, are you even taking the time to think about it? Or have you even considered whether your supply or your ingredients are fresh or not? I mean, there's one, if folks don't care or they're not concerned about it, that's one thing. But at least if you've made a conscious decision that you are okay with how it is now, that's fine. But if we're kind of just blindly going through saying, okay, I order this stuff from this person and this from this vendor and so on and so forth, and become this like robotic kind of habitual sourcing mentality, particularly in craft brewing, I think we get really, really, really one-dimensional. And all of a sudden, we have started to kind of block out all of the other potential you have in your ingredients, because what goes into your beer affects how your beer comes out. And so, Mill Fresh was never really this intent to put this hard and fast deadline on when that bag of malt needs to be depleted in your brew house. It was simply the question of, do you know when it was made, or do you know how long it's been in your brew house, or like how long has that chip clip been on that like bag of Crystal 40 that you bought like 3.5 years ago? Have you tasted it since that you put the chip clip on it, right? And so it was really this thing of just bringing attention to asking the question and not so much taking people to task. And it was also a call to action for people to give some thought to it. And then whatever your decision is, at least it's based on an informed thought process. And so we do believe that, freshness is a thing, particularly in our specialty malts. They're volatile compounds that are produced during roasting and high temp kilning that are really lost over time. And then, but there's also this component of, fresh base malt. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be out of the kiln 12 hours ago. It's just saying use it when it is at its highest point of potential and at its peak of flavor contribution. And I think once people start to kind of at least give it a few minutes of thought, it's like, well, now that you mention it, I didn't really like this or like that, or I heard about somebody being down here that's a potential supplier, and all of a sudden the world's kind of opened back up again. And so it's nothing more than just asking a question and seeing if folks make it a priority.
I couldn't have said it better.
That was great. You're just really saying some good lines, man. All right, I want to just wrap it up now because we're getting close to the end. Could you share a story of a meaningful collaboration that you as a craft maltster have done with a brewer? And maybe possibly this could be a story that was like how you convinced that brewer to buy craft malt or something like that. But because I know that I would also love to just hear your parting thoughts on what do we say to brewers to get them to consider giving craft malt a try? And maybe what's an easy way they can do that?
Right at the beginning, right as things were starting to open up here in the summer, I partnered with one of our craft malt seal breweries, and we brewed a beer called Essential Industry, and because we are, and we had. And my crew came down, they brewed the beer. It was a German style Pilsner. So we partnered with 2 local farmers to bring us sausages for the event. And we grilled brats. So we, put a big circus tent outside because nobody wanted to be indoors, obviously. It was like a 92-degree day too. But we grilled all these brats and some veggie ones too. And we, shared the beer, and we told the story about us and where our malt comes from, and then this brewer is utilizing it to brew this beer, and this meat is made on this comes from this hog on this farm, and we made this whole like circular beautiful event and called it Essential Industry. And so that beer is actually going to become a year-round beer for them. It's going to go in cans here, I think in May. So I'm really excited for it to come full circle and now become like a beer on your shelf. So shout out to Dual Citizen for such a great partnership. As far as, how do I get people to buy craft malt? I take them samples. I talk about where it's from. I show up. I be present. I talk about what is what impact it has upon us as people. I relate to them as a small business. I talk to them about their kids and their grandparents. You get full service real people, when you get craft malt, and that's something I don't ever want to be lost.
Arne, do you have any thoughts?
Absolutely. So Jen's conversation there with the sausages and brats and the event that she had, that's fantastic. And it just kind of reminds me, the 4 of us can have this conversation amongst ourselves. We could talk for weeks and drink beer and eat brats and have a great time. But at least
absolutely,
I'm forgetting that our audience is actually the brewers. Hopefully they're watching and listening. But the people that we have left out of the conversation is the drinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Beer drinkers. That's the base. you got the farmers and you got the drinkers. And I realized the initial question is what one of our recent collaborations was. And I'm kind of glad to tell this story. So Shoe Tree Brewing in Carson City, Nevada, fairly small, really good guys. They're up and coming. They were just voted Nevada's Brewer of the Year, which is pretty exciting. So they took a chance on us. They came out and they toured the farm and looked at the facility, and they bought some malt. They're making beer. So they brewed a lager, and the 100% of their grain bill was our Pilsner malt. You know, we all know about adjunct brewing and the blah 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 and the blended grains and all the things you can do to make things perfect. So anyway, they took a chance. They took our Pilsner malt. They brewed this lager. They called it 40 Mile Lager, which is feather in our hat. So they took this beer, very popular with the locals, the drinkers, and they entered it in the New York International Beer Competition. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know they were going to enter the competition or anything. Well, our little homegrown, home-brewed Nevada beer took gold in the premium lager condition. We're pretty proud of that.
Awesome.
That is so cool.
So
Congrats.
thank you. To the brewers, that tells them, hey, take a chance on these craft maltsters. Read the COAs, have the conversation, but don't be afraid to experiment. Get outside the box a little bit.
Absolutely.
Or return to the traditional farming, malting, brewing. There's a market there. And back to the drinkers, the people that buy it, they appreciate it. The stuff flew off the shelf. We're getting response from it. The friends that I grew up with, that I farm with, that I drink with, I mean, they bought out that 40 Mile Lager as fast as they could.
That's awesome.
That's a success story. We're real proud of that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story.
Yeah, good for you.
Thank you.
So I guess in my episode of collaboration, I mean, we are actually in a collaboration right now. I am not at the malt house.
Oh, that's right. You're at Wheatland Spring Farm and Brewery right now.
Yeah, so I am sitting in the beautiful bed and breakfast cottage at Wheatland Spring Farm and Brewery. So this is up in Waterford, Virginia. It's about 45 minutes to an hour with traffic west of DC. And Wheatland Spring is a true farm brewery, is the true essence of what defines a farm brewery.
Yes.
They grow all of their grain here on their property. They send it on to us. We malt it. We send it back to them. It's one of our, we do about 3 different contract malting gigs every year that we try to weave into our normal production malting. And it has just become a family sort of feeling around here in Wheatland. We are here today brewing an all Loudoun County beer. So we sourced some 2-row Calypso barley from Three Monkeys Farm here in Loudoun County. We also got some soft red wheat from another local farmer here, Chris Van Black, and they sent us. We brought this down to the malt house. We got this malted. Brought it back up. Another neighboring farm brewery, Dirt Farm, they brought some raw soft red wheat in that was grown on their farm, and then we brought locally grown Cascade hops in using Wheatland Spring well water, using cultured yeast from Jasper Yeast Labs here in Northern Virginia, and so this is essentially a true expression of the ingredients in beer. And it is really, Wheatland has been an amazing partner and huge believer in what Murphy and Root is doing. They also work really closely with Sebastian down at Epiphany Craft Malt in North Carolina. And so that's actually even brought Sebastian and I really close together. And so it's really been a good, kind of stepping stone in how beer can bring different industries together, different families together, different operators together, and really kind of celebrate what we're able to do at a much more local level. And I mean, they're pumping out easily some of the best beer in the state here, and not a single bag of that goes into their mash tun is not craft malt. And so I think it's a good testament to what we're doing as craft maltsters, but what consumers are paying attention to in the craft beer world and appreciating Wheatland Spring for what they're doing. And so I couldn't be happier. We do a lot of collaborations, and it's just a really a blessing to see all of these breweries, big and small, put our logo on their labels and try to educate the consumer about what is actually going on.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was lovely. Yeah, Wheatland Spring Farm and Brewery was just featured in a very wonderful article in Brewing Industry Guide. It was a brewer profile of them, and Murphy and Root got a mention, and Epiphany, and but it was just really cool to read more about what they're doing, and the whole concept of land beer was really neat. I loved learning about that. But anyways, I think it's time for us to wrap up, guys. We only have a few minutes left. So I just wanted to thank everyone who watched live today for joining us. Thank the speakers. I appreciate you guys taking your time, taking some time out of your day to join us and to talk about these things. I think we learned a lot and covered a lot of interesting, aspects of craft malt at this time. And if anybody's interested in learning about the Craft Maltsters Guild, you can go to craftmalting.com. And also, there was mention today of the Craft Malt Certified Seal Program. If you're interested in learning more about that, there's also information about that on our website. So I will end it and say thank you, everyone, and look forward to maybe joining you for a future Craft Beer Professionals conference.
Or sit down and have a beer.
Yes.
Most importantly.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse, for putting this together. It was awesome.
Yes. Thank you all for participating. It was lovely. How do we stop it? I don't know how to stop it. Maybe it just does leave studio. Maybe I guess we should all just leave.
Okay.
So just click leave studio and we'll all go. All right. Have a great rest of your day, y'all.
See ya.